So welcome back to the third lecture of the Intelligent Systems course, to the third one of the first week about search and games, state spaces. I've got a bit of feedback about the recordings. I don't know whether you had a look at it. Are there any suggestions for improving the recordings? Is it... yeah, first of all, is it useful? Because it costs quite a lot of time to put it online on the day itself. So, who had a look at them or checked them out? Or let's put the question differently. Shall I put the things online, yes or no? Yes. Who wants them online? Okay, that's clear. Okay, good. I just don't want to waste time on this if you don't think it's necessary. Okay, so let's get going. On Monday, I started to explain the basic principles of search in a state space. So trying to represent complex problems in an abstracted way so that we can apply generic methods such as the different search methods that we discussed. And the ones we started out were uninformed. So we started out with just putting nodes that we could get to by some actions and transitions from a state to a next state. We put them in a list or in a queue, and then we worked systematically through this queue to check out whether one of them was a solution or not. And the different data structures that we used gave us different search behavior. So that was the first lecture. The second lecture was that basically that's in many, many cases not good enough. So we need to order the nodes that we have evaluated, and we need to put them in the list or in the queue in an ordered fashion. And in this ordering is usually done by some estimation or some guesstimate of how good the node that we would get to, the state in which we are, how good it is. So we use some heuristics to decide on a value to give to a specific state of the game that we're playing or the situation we are in. And then yesterday, after the break, we moved to the more complex situation where we are not alone in the world, but where we have multi-agents and where there is someone else who tries to, as an opponent who tries to minimize my results while I try to maximize it. And this basically is the situation that we have in a game where both sides want to win, and winning for the one means the other to lose. So one wants to make a maximum score, the other, and wants to push the other one to a minimum score. And this basically led to this search behavior where we start out with maximizing, if we are the max player, maximizing our choices by looking at what my opponent would choose, namely the minimum of all the possible results. Before I go on with this, I want to make a brief comment about ships and fleets and planets that you might come across in some of the documents if we made a mistake. Last year, we didn't use Schnapsen as our practical game, but we used Planet Wars, which was a Google challenge some years ago. And basically the idea there was that you had two players, a red one and a green one, and you could send ships from one planet to other planets. And if you send a fleet that was bigger than the fleet of the opponent at this planet, then you would get hold of this planet. Basically, it's the same idea that you have a decision problem where you need to say, okay, I'm red now, and I have 7 planets, and I have to send ships. I can always send half of the ships that I have at my planet, can send them to the opponent's planet. So of these 54 ships, where should I send them? Should I send them there, 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 there? So you have about 15 planets you can send them to, and now you have to estimate how good the performance is and how many planets you can win and so forth. So it's the same idea that we have a 2-player game. And last year the students wrote computer intelligent agents to play this game. The big problem with this game is that there's very, very little explicit knowledge in this game. So it's very difficult to say, why should I now send 54 planets from this, ships from this to this? There's very little human intuition. And next week, we turn into exactly this question of how can we model this human intuition, this knowledge. And as you will encounter next week, Schnapsen or these card games, they are very knowledge rich. So you develop very quickly, some heuristics, some ideas of, okay, if I have a jack and a queen and a king, I don't play the jack, but I play the queen because I have a marriage and I get extra points. Or if you have a 2 in the first phase of the game, if you have a jack and you have a 10, you do not play the 10, because if your opponent trumps it, you will get lots of points. So there's a very rich body of knowledge, of human knowledge, that we try to model next week. And that's why we shifted from last year's Planet Wars to this year's Schnapsen intelligent agents. This has 2 consequences. The first one is the good news, and I think that it's a far more interesting game to play it and to write intelligent agents for. It comes at a cost. Everything you change for such a course comes with mistakes. And Geoffrey and Paul, who implemented the game engine, did a fantastic job. But the code will contain bugs. So please bear with us here. So if you come across a bug, send a bug report, send an email. The same holds for the worksheets. We have all the material worked out with experience, works fine. We have now translated those worksheets, and sometimes a heuristic is still based on ships, which is obviously nonsense, but only because we didn't spot it. Please, again, bear with us. Just send an email, comment in the sheets. Many of you have done that already, so thank you for those who did. We try to fix those as quickly as we can, and we try to keep the code base as stable as possible. But there might be the sort of first-year hiccup that we face now that we look into Schnapsen. There's a second thing now that I wanted to say about Schnapsen. We talked about the game as a state space problem, where we have the transitions of a player plays a card, and then you get from one state to another one. And last time I represented this by, you have 5 cards, and then there were 5 options you could play. Yeah, so this is this was the way I represented it. And I said that, be careful, this is a representation of the transition and not of the state itself. So this is an example how the state now, the real state now looks in Schnapsen. So you have 20 cards, and each of these cards can have 4 different values. It can be in the hand of Max, that would be an XH. It could be won by I, by the min. It could be won by X, and it can be in the hand of X, hand of I. So I have, here is hand of I. And they can be in the pile. Interestingly enough, the pile in Schnapsen has to be ordered, because the cards are given out in a certain order. So on the hand, it doesn't matter. The cards don't need to be ordered, so we have just one value. But on the cards in the pile, we have to order them. And given this state, the game engine can very easily run a game. Because it just means that if I now take the ace of spade from X's hand, sorry, it's already one there. So let's take the jack of heart, which is in the hand of X, and if I play it, then the state changes from X hand to one X or lost, won by I. So we just need, in a transition from one state to another, we just have to change a value in this state. So this is the game state. This is the perfect information state. This represents exactly one game. Now we discussed already last time that Schnapsen is a game of imperfect information. So we have the game engine that has this perfect information because it should know where all the cards are. But the fun of the game is that the player itself does not know does not have the full information. So this would be the situation after, let me count, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I made a mistake there. It should be an even number, of course. So this isn't a valid state, or it is a state after one card might have been played. So in any case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cards which are unknown to the player, which means that they are either in the pile or in the hand of the opponent. So when you write your intelligent agent in the practical this week, the kind of information you will give is this. For the player only has this partial information where there are question marks where you don't know the value. Of course, the game engine knows it, otherwise you couldn't play the game. And this is where the uncertainty comes in. What card should I play, given that I even don't know where the ace of hearts is? Okay, so this was a bit of background about the game and the way it is represented. We'll get back to that. Now let's recap the min-max and the heuristics, because it was again at the end rather fast and we were all a bit tired, probably, I was at least. There's one thing I want to really, really emphasize again, and that is min-max is an offline procedure. What does it mean? It's not online search in the sense that the environment changes. It is a procedure that I apply at a certain moment in time where I try to investigate the state space. So I try to think ahead, what could happen? And then according to what could happen, I take the optimal decision. But there is nothing done so far. Yeah? In an online search, the environment changes, which makes it far more difficult to do. So in a way, we are going to do both things later, because you will be in a game position. You will try with min-max or with your algorithms to find the best move to go ahead with. And then you will make your move. And then your opponent makes a move, and then you start again. You do the min-max again. There would be one way, if you have a perfect information game, it might make sense to just calculate min-max once. You know the winning strategy. You just play it, done. You don't have to recalculate your strategy. In our case, we will probably have to do both, because in every trick that is played, we get more information. So in every trick that's played, we can estimate better whether we win or not. So our information improves every trick, and that makes it then an online game. But the algorithm, at the moment that I described, the min-max algorithm, is based on the assumption that we are not making any decision yet, but we're just calculating the optimal one. And at the end of the process of calculating the min-max, we make the move that is considered best. Yeah? Okay, so let's get back at the algorithm. So the idea is that we call a procedure min-max decision, and we look for the max value, so the maximum value that we can give to a state according to the rules of playing first by max, and then by min, and then by max, and then by min. So we call the procedure max value, that's the second one in the middle here. And the function max value returns either the utility value, that's how I explained it in the beginning, or it explains an estimation, a heuristic value of the position I'm in, depending on whether I can calculate all the gains till the end or whether I have to do some cutoff in the middle. And basically what you do is you look at all the successors, and then you make a recursive call. You say, I suppose that my opponent gives me the minimal values back, because that's what she wants to achieve. So of all the minimal values of my successor states, I take the biggest one, and that's it. And obviously the algorithm for calculating the minimal values is a recursive call to this next function, which does the same by minimizing all the maximal choices that Max can make. That's the algorithm. And we had two different ways of calculating the values for the function. And the one was based on, yes, I can run the whole process, I can reach the end of the game. I can say, okay, I win or I lose, or I win by so many points. And then I can simply apply the full min-max to the end. And that is what we call the utility value. It wins by an innings and 3 wickets. The player X gets 33 points, player I gets 69, so she wins. Player X wins by 3 points, or he wins by 1 point. This is something we can really calculate because we have the finite search space for Schnapsen. A heuristic value is something that you need in chess, for example, because you will never be able to calculate up to all the leaves of your tree, because it's far too big, both in terms of breadth and in terms of depth. So we need a heuristics that tells us how good a position is, and we need then to cut off the search and say, okay, we look in chess up to a level of 5 or 10 or 15, and then we make an estimation of how good is my position. And based on this estimation, I roll up the min-max again, and then I make the decision in the end. And there might be sort of heuristics that tell us in Schnapsen that if you play a trump ace is better than a random jack. And we could turn this into heuristics. The question is whether it's true or not. It depends on the phase of the game. So one has to really be very careful about these kind of heuristics in Schnapsen. But that's the kind of thing that you guesstimate how good your game position is. So the idea basically in more complex games is that you have to find some cutoff point and then estimate the quality of the nodes that you're in and simply ignore what is underneath. The interesting thing about this is that this basically turns a game of perfect information, like chess. We always know what position we are in. We know in principle it's deterministic. We can in principle look through the entire search space with exception of looping, but we can even stop the loops. We can search the entire space, but obviously it will take us forever and longer. So this is not feasible. So even if we have the perfect information, this is computationally not possible. So we turn this perfect information game into an imperfect information game where we say, okay, we don't know whether we're going to win, but we think that we're going to win. And that's good enough for coming up with a decision. So sacrifice perfect information for performance. Something that someone like Shannon already recognized 70 years ago. The interesting thing is that we are going to turn this around and do exactly the opposite with Schnapsen when we implement phase 1. Because in phase 1, we have imperfect information. We don't know where the cards are, whether they are in my opponent's hand or in the pile. And although there are only 14 cards that are unknown, this creates an enormous complexity, as I will show later. So one of the solutions, which is the Monte Carlo sampling algorithm, is simply to do the assumption that we have perfect information and do a random rollout. So it's an interesting sort of angle that, on the one hand, we have to tame the complexity of the algorithm by assuming imperfection, and on the other hand, if we want to tame complexity in the sense of what are the different options we have in such a game, we assume perfect information and we do sampling over this assumption. So how does this heuristic evaluation works? You produce for any game state which you sort of define to be the leaf of your search, you define a heuristic value, and then in principle you do exactly the same as you had before. So this works if you have a game where a small change in a position changes also your heuristics relatively in a minor way, so that there are no really radical changes in your heuristics, otherwise it wouldn't really work. Still, there are some problems with this, but I get into that in a minute. So I hope everybody here is familiar with chess, at least with the basic rules. Here are some examples of board positions where one would say, okay, black has a better position than white. And obviously the idea of the game is that in the beginning, in the first state, both players should more or less have the same chances of winning. In the second one, white is slightly better because it has moved more of its figures already to the position of the king. But it's really is a very minor difference. It's very difficult to quantify, I would say, because they have the same figures. So the one has lost a pawn, the other one a knight. If you count them, they usually count the same way. So there would be the consideration, a professional chess player would tell you that this is slightly better. This one is more clear. You have more figures collected by black. So black is in a winning position, or chances of black winning are higher. And here you are relatively close to an end game where black can make a decision. So there are 4 different ways of arguing why the one is better than the other. So one way of dealing with that is that you simply give a weighted heuristics based on small heuristics, different heuristics, which is usually a good idea if these heuristics are independent. So if the heuristics measure the same thing, you just sort of double the weight and don't add much information. But finding these heuristics, give me a card, suppose that I play a card, do I end up in a better position by playing this one card rather than the other one, is exactly the challenge of finding a good heuristics for the game. And all the heuristics that we provide you with the game engine are rather poor, I can promise you. So here is a game, a famous game, which shows that these heuristics are all very, very fallible. It's called the Immortal Game. It was played almost 200 years ago, and it went into the history. And what you can see is that white, one after the other, loses its figures. But it develops a very good position, which is difficult to explain. And you have to be careful. The chessmate lasts about a millisecond, so you would probably miss it. So here you see that the pawn eats the knight, but the movement is very strong on the white side. And now the sacrifices start, where here you see the castle will be attacked now, but you also see that this position starts developing very strongly. There's more eaten there, and now comes the chessmate, so you have to really be very quick. It's not this one because now the queen has been taken, but this is the chessmate situation. Yeah. And if you look it up in the Immortal Game, then you will see the end game as well. I thought I had a picture of it, but the idea about it is that this is an example where all your heuristics will tell you that white is playing extremely badly. Yeah. So white, in terms of these chess heuristics, did an appalling game and won brilliantly, and this is exactly why this became so famous. There is another example of where heuristics become difficult, and that's called the horizon effect. that there might be a strong change after some time, which is not covered by your heuristics. And that is in this case that this pawn, the white pawn that you can hardly see there, can move one step further and it will become a queen. And at the moment it becomes a queen, the player wins. So if you just apply all the standard heuristics, it will radically shift at the moment that the pawn reaches the end. But black can postpone this moment for about 20 moves by moving the castle up and down. Yeah, it can do it, I think, 10 times. And then the white king can come over here, and then it's over. And then at the moment that this happens, white gets a queen and wins the game. So this means that we never know at which time such a radical change happens, and if it's slightly outside our horizon, then our heuristics will simply not work. And unfortunately, you never know when this radical change will happen. One final word about heuristics. These heuristics are difficult to come up with by humans, but it is one of the things that a machine can do very well. And it's one of the things that really explain the success of the machine learning approaches to games such as Go. Because what you basically can do is to train a neural network to give you the right strategy, the right heuristics. So one of the things, the strength of these machine learning approaches is that you can train a machine learning program to estimate the value of a state that you would go to or not. And we'll deal with that in week 3. So the good news is that basically for phase 2, we now have everything we need to implement it. So it's a simple min-max algorithm that I explained now. You have to be careful because the trick order chain is different to the standard algorithm that I gave, because there min always calls max iteration. And in this case, it might be that if you win the trick, you might choose again. So it might be that you have to call twice max. So there is some difference. And for the rest, this is not too bad. As I said, we have 5 times 5 period, 15,000 nodes that we have maximally to evaluate, and that's obviously very easy to do. If you go to the version of 66, then you have 6 cards, just 1 card more per color, and you already get an order of magnitude more complex. So you can see that this increases quickly. And this is in principle bad news, because as I will show you later, we want to maybe apply min-max very, 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 very often. So one way of doing a rollout, this random rollout that I talked about in the Monte Carlo sampling, is to simply calculate until the end of the search on the basis of complete information. But we could also say that we go to the phase 2 and then do the full min-max calculation. And then we talk about hundreds of thousands of times applying min-max algorithm. And then if you have this size, whether you have to calculate 14,000 nodes or 500, really, really makes a difference. So although this is still something we can manage, your min-max algorithm will probably be efficient enough to do this in a very short time. If you do it 1,000,000 times, it will be different. So we have to do something about it. And the second bad news is obviously that if we have a phase 1 game, then we have a huge uncertainty, because we don't know which cards our opponent has. And that means that we have no idea what min will do in the second phase. And obviously, I don't even know what kind of cards I have myself in 2 moves after 2 tricks, because I get random cards, not random cards, but unknown cards from the pile. So here we face a real problem. So it's not, we can't search this systematically anymore. And I'll get into that at the end of the lecture. So this is what we are dealing with. On the one hand, the trees are too big to systematically search. And we have to turn this imperfect information game into a perfect information game by Monte Carlo sampling. And these are the two things that I want to explain in the rest of this lecture. Before that, I've learned in one of these teacher classes that the normal, the span of attention of normal people, not only students, but everybody, is about 25 minutes. So after 25 minutes, you should do some sports or whatever. So I have some entertainment. So you have to listen carefully. I hope it works. Do I have anybody playing the clarinet in the room? No clarinet player in the room? I'm extremely unlucky this year, so there's never anybody in. I really need your CV, so that's what you're doing. So next time I will adapt it. Is there anybody interested in modern classical music? Excellent, I found one. Perfect. So, who's heard of the name of Bird Whistle or the name of Pierre Boulez? Okay, I think I stop. This is not by either one of them, but it's a piece, as you might have already guessed, that has been composed by an AI. If I was in a concert, someone would play it and would tell me it was one of the modern composers, I would believe it. And I'm pretty interested in this stuff. I wouldn't. I mean, in this context now, it's clear that it must have something to do with AI. But I will play later in the break. I will give you one where I think I would have fooled you all. So why do I bring this up now? Because on the one hand, I wanted to give you your well-deserved 25 minutes break, but I also wanted to explain that this kind of composition is also, in principle, this more or less the same as we've done before. Because what does it mean? It's a clarinet piece, so you have a melody, you have different dimensions of decisions that you have to take. You have to make the decision, which note do you play? So you can play a C or a B or in different octaves. You have to decide on which moment do I play it. I have to decide on which rhythm do I give it. So the very basic way of implementing this would be simply as a search space, namely, give me some optimal criteria, some heuristics of what sounds better than others. So we could say that a harmony sounds better, gets a higher heuristic value. So let's find things that sound more like something we are aware of. And I believe that this particular AI is more on reproducing based on existing pieces of music and then putting those together. But in principle, you can reduce this problem of composing music to a relatively simple search problem that's close to what we've discussed in the first lecture, or in the second lecture, in the beginning maybe. So an informed search problem. I find this an interesting question because it leads to something that we would probably consider to be creative in a way, composing a piece of music, and it's done by a relatively simple algorithm. One that I can explain in 2 days to you so that most of you at least look as if you understand them a little bit. Okay, break is over. Let's go to alpha-beta pruning, which is the way of making min-max more efficient. So it's a version of min-max, but now in a more efficient way. So it's the taming of the beast, of the complexity, and basically the goal is to get off these having to search for all these 15,000 or 500,000, or if you have chess, yeah, we talk not infinitely, but incredibly many states to search through. So the solution is, do not examine all the nodes, but make sure that you avoid the options that are redundant, where you could know upfront that they don't need to be solved because they will not contribute to the result. So let's revisit this example that we had yesterday, I believe. So we had some values on the leaves of the tree, and the question was, what is the maximum value that Max can achieve to get after a min-max? Basically, before we start the search, we don't know anything, so it could be any value from minus infinity to plus infinity. Easy. Then let's go down depth first way to min-max, to min, and min is the same. It doesn't know anything, so the value for min could be anything between minus infinity and plus infinity. Okay, now things become interesting, because now min, in the first search step, finds the value 3. And this changes the potential choices it can make. Yeah? Because min takes the smallest value, so it will never choose a value that's bigger than 3. Yeah? Because whatever comes here, if this is a 4, min will not choose it, because it has already seen the 3 and will choose the 3. Everything that's bigger will be ignored. So basically, we now have an interval here, information that the choice that min will take will be between min infinity and 3. What we also know is that max will probably be bigger than 3. I'm not sure why this is the case. Anyway, let's go on. So we get a 12, it's bigger than 3, nothing done. We get an 8, nothing done. So all the options that min can choose is 3, 12, and 8, so min chooses 3. And now I think this information is available, namely that x is bigger than, that max has to choose something that's bigger, can choose something that's 3 or bigger, because it will never, independent of what min does, it will never ever pick something that's smaller than this 3, because it has already the 3 to choose from. So now we have an interval propagated from this min node to the max node. Okay, so what does it buy us? It buys us the following. Now you go to the next node to evaluate, and you find a 2. Yeah? That means that the interval that min can choose, it goes from minus infinity to 2. But we see that max will always choose something that's 3 or bigger. So there is no way that anything interesting can be in these two nodes. This is the crucial point now. Are you with me here? Yeah? Because whatever value I find here must be smaller than a 2 to change anything on the min-max. But if it's smaller than 2, it will have no impact on max, because max already has something to choose bigger than 3, or 3 itself. So basically, this means that we do not have to look at these branches. They are redundant. We can simply ignore them. Okay, so that helped us already to cut off these 2 branches. And if we now talk about a big search tree, then this might be many nodes underneath. So then the same thing happens now that we go down. We see a 14. Min can choose anything that's smaller than 14, so we already get an interval 3 to 14 for x to choose from. And this interval is getting smaller and smaller. So basically we propagate the values that we have on the leaves to the top of the tree. And then basically the same thing can happen that now happened on these branches, that there might also branches that you don't have to take on the min level if you have these intervals. So basically now we have calculated the value of 3 for x, because it's the maximum out of 2, 2, and 3, as we had done before, but we have explored 20% less of the nodes. And that can be significant. So this is the alpha-beta algorithm. And I will basically explain this algorithm after we had a quick break. And I had promised you I would give you another one, which would you probably be fooled into. So let's have a break until 12 o'clock and then get back to discuss alpha-beta pruning. Yeah, can I, this doesn't work without with wet fingers, so I'm still recording.
Do you need to record?
Oh, I just need to wait a bit. Let's come in.